Hello, everyone. Good evening. Welcome to Politics and Prose. My name is Susan Call, and I'm part of the events team here, and it's so nice to be back in person. We have a calendar full of both in-person and virtual events, as well as trips and classes, so please take a look at our calendar on the website. Before we get started today, just a reminder to please silence your cell phones. And a few housekeeping items. When we get to the point of taking your questions, we have a mic right there. If you could step up to the mic, that would be great, because we are recording and live streaming the event, so that way everybody can hear. And you can also watch this event again on the Politics and Prose YouTube channel. Let's see. We've got books behind the register. We've got Dolen's books as well as Chris's, so be sure to go grab some, and we've got them pre-signed. And after the event, if you don't mind just helping us by folding up your chairs and leaning them against a shelf, that would be helpful. So I'm very excited to welcome Chris Bohjalian, who's the New York Times bestselling author of 23 books, including Hour of the Witch, The Red Lotus, Midwives, and The Flight Attendant, which has been made into a delightful HBO series. He's here tonight to talk about his new novel, The Lioness, which is a historical thriller about a lavish expedition in Tanzania in 1964 where things go very wrong. The book's just out. It's getting all great reviews all over the place, and I saw on Twitter Chris mentioned that this is his 33rd book tour, which is pretty amazing. So thank you for working us onto your schedule. And he is in conversation with Dolen Perkins-Valdez. She's a New York Times bestselling author of Wench and Balm, and she has a brilliant new novel out called Take My Hand. She was here for an event a few weeks ago, which was amazing, and we're very happy to have her back. Please help me welcome Chris and Dolen.
Thank you. It's a pleasure, it's an honor, it's a privilege to be with all of you this evening now. Some of you have heard me speak before, and you are thinking, oh, for God's sakes, it is day 5 of a book tour and already he has laryngitis. I don't. I got COVID in March of 2020, and I lost my voice, and this is my new COVID voice. I'm fine. It is what it is. I've got a wonderful voice therapist in New York City. She's a former Israeli Forces Special Commando. She takes no prisoners. And our first day working together, we'd been working together maybe 7-8 hours. And at one point she said to me, Chris Bohjalian, you say this is somatic reaction to grief. I did my homework on you. You do not know grief. In 1973, you are a little boy playing the Little League Baseball in Connecticut. Me. I watched my beloved fiancé go into battle, and he is killed. And what do? I go into battle right behind him. No, Chris Bohjalian, you do not know grief. Also, I've watched so much video of you. I watch video of you before you lose voice, after you lose voice, and you are big ham. Even when your voice is total bowel movement. Even when it is all Grandpa Simpson, I am going to listen to you because you have interesting things to say. So you are not opera singer. Get over yourself. Now, the other thing I learned from her in this weird long haul side effect is that when I mimic voices, I get better voice clarity. So sometimes I try to mimic her. And once when I was mimicking her, she said, I don't sound anything like that. What do you think? I sound like a Russian hooker? So clearly, the voice that I mimic best is that of the Russian hooker. Now, some of the things we are doing and not doing tonight is we're not doing a signing line afterwards, because the little voice I've got, we are using here and now. And secondly, one of the reasons why Dolen is here is because she's a spectacularly gifted novelist, and I bow before her work, and we're going to talk about her work as well as mine, because her new book, Take My Hand, is so powerful, so moving, so beautiful, and so friggin' important right now. So, with that, I'm going to say, Dolen, thank you. Susan, thank you. Susan incidentally reviews, incident being a novelist herself, is also a book critic and recently reviewed one of my other favorite new books of the season, Grant Ginder's Let's Not Do That Again, which imagine it's like Veep, but even funnier and more touching. So, Dolen, thank you.
Thank you, Chris. You ever notice that the most talented people are the most generous and humble?
I've never noticed that. Also, we've got great swag tonight. We've got the Lioness chocolate bar, which we're going to be giving away. It's Mitch, right? Yeah. Mitch is wearing a guest room t-shirt from January of 2016. We're going to top the t-shirts with the Lioness chocolate bar.
Incidentally, it was the guest room that was out when I first met you back in 2015.
We were doing one of the weirdest gigs ever.
We were.
We were in Charlotte, North Carolina, and at the library they created rooms for our books. What was the room for your book?
My room was a seance room, and it had a chair for the woman to sit in who was doing the seance, and there were like purple drapes. It was very cool, and there were black candles. What did your room look like?
Well, it was a book about human trafficking and sexual slavery.
Oh, there was a bed.
And there's a bed.
There
It's a bed.
I remember the bed.
Yeah.
And people were taking pictures on the bed.
Yes,
it was weird.
It was really weird, yes. Yep. It's like, you go to Cinderella's castle in Orlando, Florida, in Disney World, and you get your photograph with Cinderella in the castle, and you go to Charlotte in the library, and you get your picture taken in the guest room sexual slavery bed. It was creepy.
It was, but they were well done. They
and
did
well-intentioned.
Yes, very well-intentioned.
Because it was all about books.
Well, Chris, this is book number 23.
It is.
Amazing. And your imagination is still on fire. So I just wanted to start by asking you how you got the idea for this book set in the Serengeti in 1964.
Thank you. The Lioness is an historical thriller. It is 1964, as Dolen said. It had its origins in 2019. I was in New York City because we were workshopping my stage adaptation of my novel, Midwives. And during the day, I went to a movie matinee. And when I emerged into the cobalt sun and skies and the sun and the heat, and I thought, wow, a movie matinee is a transformative experience. And I was the only human being in the theater. And that's not the first time in the last few years that I've been the only human being in a theater. And I thought two things. First of all, my God, I love movies. Why have I never written a Hollywood novel? And number two, if I'm going to write a Hollywood novel, it's not going to be set in the present because movies are changing. It's going to be set in one of Hollywood's golden ages. Because, for example, when we talk about what's in the cinematic zeitgeist now, we're not talking about the stuff we see in theaters. We're talking about Succession. We're talking about Ozark. We are talking about Billions. We're not talking about the stuff that, I love the movie Belfast, Kenneth Branagh's new movie, but I saw it on a small screen. So I knew it was going to be set in a golden age, and I'm of an era when the people my age, the first movie we saw was likely to be Mary Poppins. Dick Van Dyke, Julie Andrews, Dancing Penguins. Not me. My parents had no filter. Or they just were going to take my brother and me to whatever the hell movie they wanted to see. So the very first movie I ever saw in a theater was Bonnie and Clyde. The first thing I ever saw on the big screen was Faye Dunaway naked. My principal memory of that movie is Warren Beatty and Faye Dunaway being machine gunned in the Bonnie and Clyde death car. There's a reason my books are the way that they are. So it was going to be set in the 1960s. But I didn't want it to be just Hollywood. I loved going to Vietnam for the Red Lotus. I loved being in Dubai and Russia for the Flight Attendant. I loved being in Armenia for the guest room. So I was thinking, okay, it's the 1960s. And I realized we've got all of these Cold War proxy wars. We've got enormous cultural and social transformation, not just in the United States, but in East Africa, where all of these nations are finally escaping from colonialism, are finally escaping from being under Belgian, British, German, English rule. And so I thought, you know what? Let's take all of these Hollywood icons and take them to the Serengeti, where they will be unbelievably uncomfortable. I had no idea what was going to happen. I didn't begin the book thinking to myself, let's corner them in a tree with hyenas beneath them. I didn't begin it thinking, let's have Russian mercenaries abducting them. But I knew that it was going to go to hell fast. And I was so lucky because normally you don't get to go on a safari 2 months after you decide, I'm going on a safari. But there was a cancellation. And my wife and I were able to be passengers 7 and 8 on a safari in October. And so we were able to get to the Serengeti before the world shut down for the pandemic. I'd been there, I'd spent 2 weeks in tents. My wife had taken all of these glorious pictures and videos. She's a fine art photographer. And when the world was melting down, as it was, I was in my library in Vermont or in my head in the Serengeti.
So you did a 2-week safari in
I
the
did.
Serengeti, and you asked a lot of questions apparently while you were there. Because in this book we've got, I think it's, how many go with Katie? It's 8 people total.
It's 8 people, yeah.
8 people total go on this safari. It's sort of like her honeymoon.
Yes.
And she takes her friends and flies them first class halfway around the world. And as you say, they get there and everything goes to hell in a handbasket really quickly. It gets pretty bleak really quickly. I want to know, like, what kinds of questions did you ask those tour guides while you were on that safari when you were researching?
I was the most macabre guest they'd ever had. But they were so patient with me, and once they understood that I wasn't a serial killer, once they understood, and yeah, I think their big concern, first of all, was that I was yet another idiot American. A safari is perfectly safe if you listen to your guides.
This makes me very scared to take a safari.
Oh no, it's only dangerous if you're an idiot European or an idiot American who doesn't understand that, okay, you need to not move and you need to stay in the Land Rover because rhinos are really fast. Or that lioness and her cubs, yes, take a picture, have a great time, but don't get close to take a picture. Don't leave the vehicle. The thing about the Serengeti that I learned from these guides who are so much fun is that everything will kill you. The plants will kill you. The snakes will kill you. The animals will eat you. And it's wonderful because you really understand your place in this planet. You understand that we are very...
Tiny little frail human beings.
Well said. We are tiny little frail human beings. You know, there are other moments that were just cinematic because how we absorb even reality is infused by movies, TV series, and novels. So, for example, the 8 of us on the safari are in Arusha, in Tanzania, and we are getting on a single-engine, teeny little plane that can barely fit all of us. And we take off out of this little airstrip in this relatively small city, and it's only a 45-minute flight. but all of a sudden you are living in the movie out of Africa. All of a sudden, you feel like, you're Robert Redford or you're Meryl Streep as you're flying over the Serengeti, and there's no sign of civilization, and there's 1,000 wildebeest, or there's a massive herd of zebra. And then you start to descend, and all you do is you descend onto a grass strip, and there's nothing there but the grass strip and a Land Rover waiting for you. And it's glorious because you really have this sense that I'm only going to use my cell phone to take pictures. Screw Twitter. I'm here.
And is it really like it is in the book where they put the camp together and you sleep there and then they pull the camp up, or is now is more like glamping?
Oh, I was definitely glamping.
Okay.
I was glamping. But, that point noted, okay, the 2 weeks we were on the safari, some of the camps are permanent. The tents are permanent. But some of them, just like in the book, a group of trained professionals create civilization in about 4 hours, and then the next day make civilization disappear in about 4 hours.
So that still happens.
That still happens. And there's still the kerosene-powered ice makers. Because God forbid you should not have a proper gin and tonic, even though you are in the absolute middle of nowhere. Now, okay, so I was writing about one continent in the 1960s. In Take My Hand, you're writing about another continent in the 1960s and another moment of enormous social change. Would you talk a little bit about Take My Hand, tell them what it's about if they haven't read it, and why you glommed onto that particular moment in history?
Well, and just to make that transition more smooth for those people who haven't read the book yet, I really think that you deal so well with race in this book. There's this black actor in here who has been in these movies with this white actress, and people have responded really negatively, and that character is portrayed so well, I thought. In terms of like all of the things he's facing, and he talks about how he's able to do these things in Hollywood that would have gotten his grandfather killed and his father beaten, and so this is a great, I think, realistic portrayal of what it would have been like to be a black actor in Hollywood in 1964. So now we're going to roll forward to 1973, Montgomery, Alabama. There you go for a segue.
Well done.
I know, right? So we're professionals, Chris. We can do these things. So my book is set in 1973 Montgomery, and it is historical fiction. And this was also one of my reasons for being a Chris Bohjalian fan long before I knew him, because he writes such well-researched historical fiction. And I consider this historical fiction. Do you consider this historical fiction? Yeah, me too. Yeah. So actually, when I first started with my novel, Take My Hand, I didn't know if it was historical fiction because it was 1973, which is, I don't know, maybe on the cusp of whether it is or not, according to experts. But it is. I think it is. And it's inspired by this true story of these two little girls who were sterilized at 12 and 14 years old without their family's permission. And it was, at the time, a huge story in the American press, and also it became a huge court case that went to the highest levels of the federal government, all the way to the White House. And so I've written a book about a nurse who is not in the historical record, who is a product of my imagination, who worked at the clinic that sterilized the girls, and everything that she went through to try to get justice for them.
How do you decide when you're writing historical fiction where we need to be precise with history and where we can be a novelist?
Well, for me, it starts with the questions I have that I can't answer with my research. So I start there. Like if there's a question I have that the archives won't answer, I will then begin making things up. That's when my imagination starts to take fire. But when I'm working, I have to change things because, fiction has to work in its own universe, and so I have to change things to make my story work, So, for example, when I was working on this book, the actual court case was fought here in D.C., but I needed for my story for that court case to happen in the federal court in Montgomery, Alabama. So I asked the lawyer who argued the case, who's still alive, Joe Levin, I asked him, could you have fought this case in Montgomery? And he said, yes, I could have, but it was filed in D.C. And I said, but could you have? Could you have? And he said, yes, but it was filed in D.C. And so I just bothered him about that because I needed my story to work. So I think that, when we're shaping fiction out of something that happened, we always have to be really careful that our world works, And I often tell my students that when they write fiction that's based on something that actually happened, I say, this is the beauty of fiction, that you can actually change things to make it work in your universe. Because in real life, sometimes it doesn't work as well as a story when you put it all together. But in fiction, we have the liberty to do what we want to do with it, to shape it, to create a world that makes fictional sense.
And one of my favorite quotes is from E.M. Forster. We all know that fiction is truer than history because it goes beyond the evidence. In the house tonight is my great friend and moral compass, Dr. Hachik Moradian. And, he's a genocide scholar and works at the Library of Congress. And when we talk about historical fiction, we always come back to that quote. It's got to be true, but it's got to be true within the construct of the story.
That's right. And the story takes on a life of its own, right? When you're writing fiction, it has its own life, and the truth has its own life. And so I think if I were a journalist, a literary journalist, for example, that would be another kind of weaving of a story. You still have to make that story work in terms of what you select to be. If I were a literary journalist, I'd have to be selecting the details that really created the story. But for fiction, I can both select and change, which I find so freeing. I'm one of those people that when I can't find something in the archive, I find that freeing. I even will turn away from the newspapers so that they don't, interfere with what I want to do. That's the fun of writing, don't you think?
It is. And when I was researching the Lioness, we were talking about the time I spent in the Serengeti, but I spent a lot of time in Hollywood, and I spent a lot of time reading all of those Hollywood magazines from the 1950s and the 1960s. Before we had Twitter, we had Hollywood fan magazines. That's where you went if you were, doing serious snark. And so all of the chapters of the Lioness begin with stories about the characters from those magazines, but all of those excerpts are based on the kinds of things you actually saw in 1963 Hollywood film magazines.
I love those epigraphs, and they really set it up because each chapter changes point of view. So they really set up that point of view chapter by putting you back into the world of that particular person, because we've got this A-list movie star, Katie. We've got her husband, who is actually a therapist, not in the Hollywood world, really, but he comes from a theater family in New York. We've got the publicist. We've got the agent, we've got a B-list actress in Carmen. I guess we would call her B-list.
Yeah, but I love Carmen.
I do too.
I love Carmen Tedesco, yeah. She is. She's the sidekick. She's, the woman who's got one good scene with Natalie Wood, but isn't Natalie Wood.
You know what? I feel like there's one part of this book that is definitely in the Serengeti, and the other part of it, like you said, which is a Hollywood novel for sure, because there's lots of sort of flashbacks and backstory. I loved both of those parallel. I don't think I've ever read a book that really did that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So so you had to do a lot of research for the Hollywood part too, other than reading those magazines, what else did you do?
The thing about Hollywood in the 1950s and the 1960s is that there were all kinds of secrets that everyone knew but no one talked about, except for the magazines which would allude to them. Everyone knew, for example, that, the Academy Awards, a couple of weeks ago, Will Smith hits Chris Rock. In 1963, Bette Davis slugs Joan Crawford. But because it was a different era, it was talked about, but never ever publicly talked about it was always whispered. Rock Hudson is gay. Everyone in Hollywood knows Rock Hudson is gay. The movie magazines will hint at it, but will never, ever say it. Otto Preminger, a white director, is in love with and dating a black actress, Dorothy Dandridge. Everyone in Hollywood knows this, but no one will talk about it except for these screen magazines which will snarkily allude to it. So when I was writing Lioness, and to go back to, talking about archives, this was the sort of stuff that is really golden material for character development and backstory for my fictional people.
So, going back to the Serengeti for a moment, I was just thinking, I don't want to give any spoilers away, but can you tell us what are some of the ways that the guides, you said you were asking the guides, what are all the different ways a person can die out there?
Sure. Sure, okay.
I'm just wondering.
So you're in a small group of tents in the Serengeti, and there's one tent that is the bar and the restaurant. They literally set up a tent where you go to eat breakfast and dinner. And that's where you get your booze. Because, as I said, you're not driving, so you might as well drink. You never leave your tent at night to get booze. You just don't. Because there are animals out there, and we were there in October. In August, there had been a group of Americans, and at some point in the night, 4 of them had left 2 tents to go to the booze tent to, replenish their scotch. And the guide was furious with them the next morning because you can see all of their footprints, and you can see the footprints of at least 2 lions within, at one point, about 20 yards of them. Another thing, there are all kinds of trees where really beautiful little colorful birds will rest. And you might want to get close to photograph the birds. You don't, because some of those trees have got basically acid that comes out of the globe when you get near them. And if your finger grazes the globes pop, and all of a sudden you've burned the hell out of your hands. And then, of course, when you spend 9 or 10 or 11 hours going from one part of the Serengeti to the other in the Land Rover, there is a moment, invariably, when nature is going to call. And you need to be really, really clear with your guide ahead of time, because you're not just stopping at the Chevron station and going to the men's room, the gender-neutral bathroom, the ladies' room. You are going to pee behind an acacia bush or a baobab tree. And the guides need to make absolutely sure that before you decide that you are going to take care of your own call of nature, there aren't leopards in a nearby tree. At one point, we stopped and saw the cutest little baby leopard. She was adorable, and playing quite freely within easily 20 feet of our Land Rover, because Mom was in a branch looking down at him, and at one point somebody in the Land Rover wanted to get out to get a little bit closer, saying, "It's so cute and little, it's like a big cat." And that's when the guide had to say, "And there's an even bigger one right up there in that tree watching it."
Wow.
And then there were the snakes.
A lot of snakes, right?
A lot of snakes.
Do you worry about the snakes getting in at night?
No.
Okay.
No, I didn't worry about the snakes getting... I didn't worry about anything. I must confess. I always felt safe because you're in really good hands. You have to really be overconfident or seriously boozed up to get yourself killed in the Serengeti in 2022. Now, in 1964, it might have been a little bit more dangerous because there were fewer people. The guides were transitioning from hunting safaris to photo safaris. And the hunting safaris were filled with guns and weaponry. I mean, at one point I was describing what the armament vehicle would look like in a hunting safari from, Hemingway's time. And, I mean, you were talking serious armory.
That is so fascinating. I'm curious, so you've written so many different kinds of books. I mean, you're coming off the heels of this great TV success with The Flight Attendant, which, have y'all seen that? So good. Before we talk about The Flight Attendant for a moment, because that is so crazy, what do you think all of your books have in common? If you were to say, what makes a Chris Bohjalian novel, what would it be?
I'm going to say two things. A quest for social justice. All of these books are about characters desirous of justice in some way. Literal justice or metaphoric justice. And dread. Whether it is the flight attendant in the present, Hour of the Witch in 1662, or the Lioness in 1964. One of the things that I think keeps you turning the pages is that sense of dread. Is this character going to get out alive? Or is my heart going to be broken? Because my readers know I am perfectly fine killing off main characters. Even on the very last page of the book, I have still got readers who won't forgive me for killing a certain character in the very end of the Sandcastle Girls. I've got readers who still won't forgive me for killing a character at the end of Skeletons at the Feast.
I felt like that with this book. I didn't know what
And-
you were going to do.
No, I mean, in this book really isn't... This
A page turner.
Thank you. I want to ask you a question, but I mean, I love what somebody said about this. It's Evelyn Hugo meets Jurassic Park. It's the Poisonwood Bible meets And Then There Were None. Okay, so now, what marks one of your books? What do all of your books share?
I think all of mine are recovered histories that I find that I think people should know about, but nobody's written about. I feel like that's my calling, is to find those stories that are in the archives that are big stories, but that have been sort of swept under the rug. So that's why I always say I can't force it. The story has to find me.
Has your next story found you?
It has, but it needs some shaping. I know where I am. I know what era I'm in. I'm in North Carolina in the late 1800s. But I'm still figuring out whose story it is. That's that little point of view problem.
Take My Hand just came out, so you've got time.
I do have time.
There's
But
no
how
time.
do you do it so fast? I don't know. Maybe I need some tips here.
I write 1,000 words a day.
You do?
Yes, every day. I don't always keep 1,000 words.
Now
Well,
you take these bike rides, which I see. I follow your social media. Do you write before your bike rides? Or-
Yes,
Okay, so you get that out of the way so you can go on your nice bike. Okay.
but I often hashtag am writing, R-I-D-I-N-G, am writing, W-R-T-I-N-G, because those bike rides are instrumental in my work. When I'm riding my bike, I'm thinking about what I'm going to write the next morning. And I solve problems with scenes. I figure out what characters are going to do. It is absolutely invaluable. And what's really interesting to me is that just before we got the pandemic, my wife said to me, my wife is so smart, she said, let's get a dog. We never had a dog, so we got a dog. And my big concern was...
Is this Jesse?
This is Jesse, yeah. Oh my gosh, you do, thank you.
I know.
I
I
know.
stalk him.
I thought, how can I go on a book tour for the Red Lotus in March of 2020? I've got this new dog. We're never going to bond. Well, obviously that book tour went to hell in a handbasket. And now we're joined at the hip. So I walk her every morning. I used to be in my library at 6 in the morning every day. Now I get in the library at 8 in the morning. And it's fine. Because, I get up and I walk Jesse, and walking Jesse is different from riding my bike. I'm not thinking about my book. I'm thinking about Jesse. I'm thinking about the woods. I'm thinking about deer and wild turkeys and the eagle who sometimes fly overhead. It has nothing to do. It's the closest a monumentally screwed up head case like me will ever get to meditation.
I can tell that because you go on those very long walks through the woods. I think y'all discovered some bones or something one time.
Many times, but recently.
Some bones.
Yeah.
Now, how long does it take you to write that? I mean, you're writing 7 days a week?
I do. I write Easter morning, I write Christmas morning, I write every day I'm not on tour.
And how long are you actually writing?
About 5 or 6 hours a day. It used to be 6 or 6:30 till noon. Now it's 8 until 1:30.
1,000 words takes you 5 or 6 hours?
It does. Partly because there's the warm-up, where I begin rewriting what I wrote the day before.
Okay.
There's the time I spend watching movie trailers. I begin my day by watching movie trailers or TV series trailers because these beautifully produced 2 and 3 minute commercials for videos and movies instantly catapult me into a particular emotional place. And that's really important to me. Yeah. I got a question for you.
Okay.
How did the pandemic change you?
As a writer?
Yep. Or as a human being?
Well, you know, Chris, I have kids at home. You don't have kids at home, and they were virtual schooling.
You were in that innermost ring of Dante's Inferno known as Zoom school.
It was Zoom school. It was terrible.
No one should have to do that.
No one. And my little one, who was in 1st and 2nd grade through the pandemic, needed somebody to transition her from class to class, so I was interrupted constantly. And my teenager was upstairs, like with her camera off, rolled up in a blanket on the floor, saying that she was watching the screen. And I was like, okay, you need to get in your chair and turn the camera on. So it was rough for a little while there. I mean, you know, everybody was hurting. But I will say, generally speaking, it did change me because I used to really need silence. I'm not a sort of music person. I'm not a go in the coffee shop with a bunch of people talking around me person. I'm a silence person. And I learned how to write with noise around me because I didn't have a choice. That was a big thing. And now I also will use my headphones with music, which I never did before. And I've still been doing that even with the kids back in school, like, you know, using the music to kind of get in it more quickly. I didn't have the luxury of the warm-up when COVID happened that I usually had. You know, usually I have an hour to get my coffee and sharpen my pencils and straighten my desk and, you know, like just kind of get myself there. But now I don't have that kind of shoulder time, so I have to just dive in. And that means some days are better than others. Yeah. But what about you? Did the pandemic change you?
Oh, it did. For better, for worse, it changed. You know, obviously changed my voice. The last time I got stoned before the pandemic was probably 1983.
Oh God!
Now I do it all the time. I mean, I spend my life stoned now. I mean, there's nothing better in a pandemic than Veep and a couple edibles.
I need to come to Vermont. Y'all know how to do it up there.
Oh, but it's not. Yeah, I know. I have to go to Massachusetts. I mean, it's not legally. I mean, you can't. It will be in October.
It will be.
Yeah. So I mean, one of the great things about having to go to Mass ENT for my voice is, you know, I just go to the dispensary when I'm done. When they're done sticking things down my throat with cameras, I just go to the dispensary.
Does that help with your writing?
Does
it make you clearer? Can you think?
Okay, I've never tried writing stoned. Yeah. So I don't know. Yeah. I do know that. Okay, I'm gonna only read one part.
This is so fun. Isn't this so fun? I'm having such a good time up here with Chris.
Okay. This is. Okay. I'm not just going to read the epigraph.
Okay, let's read.
I'm the dedication.
Your dedication. Okay.
Because going back to getting stoned.
Okay.
And how the pandemic changed me. This is literally the dedication. And Hotchik is in the audience tonight. He's one of the people in this. You know, for my pod, literal and metaphoric, from 2020, the year that Satan spawned, and the first half of 2021. When I was hanging on by my fingernails, you gave me your hand. You are my safari. Now, I could have said, when I was hanging on by my fingernails and thinking of just letting go, you gave me your hand. Because, there were just moments in 2020 when, between the pandemic and hundreds of thousands of people dying.
This is your COVID pod?
Yeah.
Oh.
And it's, a lot of these are people.
I love that.
Here's the other thing about this voice. While everyone else is on the phone or FaceTiming or Zooming, because this was really at its worst in 2020 and neurologically, I still can't use the phone. And I couldn't Zoom or FaceTime. So I was really friggin' isolated. It was me, Victoria, my lovely bride, our dog, geriatric cats, in the middle of Vermont. And so, there were moments in the pandemic when I just thought, I'm done. This is just, between Trump and the pandemic, and then in September of 2020, Azerbaijan attacks Armenia, and it just seemed, then Biden wins. Oh, hope. And then, of course, there's January 6th. And, my wife is a fine art photographer, and her galleries, 3 of them went out of business. And, my daughter is a young actor, and her career completely disappears because there's no acting, there's no stage acting. So, yes, edibles are good.
It all goes back to that.
All goes back to the edibles. Okay, I've got chocolate for tonight. The next time I'm at Politics and Prose, I'm bringing edibles.
It's legal here. It's a gift.
Okay, can I tell you one other great edible story?
Sure.
I'm going to not use the actual names. But Vermont, like Washington, like Northern Virginia, has a lot of writers. And I'm having lunch with a writer who's about 10 years older than me. And he said to me, have you ever done marijuana? And I said, well, not today, but last night. And he said, okay. And he says the name of another writer who is easily in her mid-70s, has stopped growing her dope, and has stopped giving him and his wife their weed cookies. And she's having trouble sleeping. And so is there any chance when I'm in Massachusetts I can bring them back? And I said, yes, of course I can. And the thing I love about this story is, this group of 70-year-old writers who I'm friends with, who for years have been, having hash brownies that are grown by a multi-award-winning novelist who is so buttoned up and so professional. I loved everything about that. And so now I bring him and I bring her their edibles, but I will not ever let them pay me for it because I feel like...
Bestselling.
Yeah, I feel like we're crossing this weird line. I mean, John Mulaney's got this great joke. John Mulaney talks about how when he got out of rehab late last year, or when he went to rehab, the first thing you've got to do in rehab, he says, is you've got to text your dealer and say, I am taking you off my phone. You are never to contact me again, and I'm never going to contact you. And before he could delete the number, his dealer texts him back and says, oh, John, man, I'm so proud of you. That's great. And so John goes, whoa, this dealer. What? So I text him back and say, wait, you're happy? You're not going to get any more business from me? And he says, my God, yes. I always felt so guilty selling to you. And so I text him, you're a dealer who feels guilty. And he texts back and said, I'm not a dealer, I'm a painter. You were really losing your shit at a party, so I got you some dope, and it became this weird habit. So John Mulaney says, the world is filled with dealers who turn innocent people into drug addicts. I am the only drug addict on the planet who turned an innocent person into a dealer.
That is hilarious.
Is that too much information?
No.
I'm so glad we're streaming this live.
I know.
And there you have it, America.
Notice the necktie. Notice the necktie.
It's starting to move while I look at it. Yes, yes. Shall we take questions?
First questions. Okay. I saw, Susan, that you found the chocolate bars.
We found one box of 12.
That's all you needed.
Okay, good.
I mean, I'm not even going to give away 12 tonight. It's actually for 2 nights. It's for tonight and tomorrow. We're giving away 6 tonight.
Okay.
I'm sorry. We can almost give almost everyone one.
There's a mic here if anybody wants to come up and ask a question.
And the first question is the hardest. For you, for Dolen, for me, so whoever is willing to ask the first question gets the first Lioness chocolate bar, and I'm going to tell you all about it.
That's right.
Is it on?
Hello. What's
Hi.
your name?
I'm Susie.
Hi, Susie.
Can you hear me okay? Okay, so first I want to say really quick that you have been an inspiration for my kids from when they were little. They're no longer little.
Oh my God, I was talking about edibles.
Oh, well, they will talk to you about edibles as well. The youngest one, I can't remember how old she was, but she was probably too young to read the Sandcastle Girls. When we read it, we listened to it. We're Armenian. Well, I'm Armenian by choice. So our daughter went on to do things like write letters to the editor about the genocide and things like that, and I just want to thank you for your inspiration. I've got a picture of her and my son with you. She's wearing the Sandcastle Girls t-shirt that she won in Fresno.
Oh my gosh, I remember that day.
Yeah, I'll show you again. You'll remember.
Of course.
So our son is now 22 and works at Yerevan Cafe here in D.C., so if you have a chance to go there, go. Okay, here's the question.
Okay.
So you talked about watching trailers and things like that to get into an emotional state. Can you tell a little bit about like what kinds of emotional states you're trying to get into? Do you like watch specific ones in order to get into a specific state, something like that?
A great question. How do I pick the trailers? I'll give you a perfect example. When I was writing the novel The Guest Room, which is fundamentally about 3 people. It's about a young Armenian woman who is trafficked by Russian gangsters to the United States. It's about Richard Chapman, a successful New York City businessman, and his wife Kristen. So there were 3 trailers I watched a lot, depending on whether I was writing a scene from Kristen, Richard, or Anid's perspective. So when I was writing about the businessman, I would watch the trailer for Birdman, because Birdman is about a guy at midlife who just once wants to make the right decision and just once wants to do something important. And that would always get me into Richard's head. When I was writing about his wife, Kristen, I would watch the trailer for a small indie film starring Jennifer Aniston called Cake, which is about one woman's unbelievable private pain. And when I was writing about the young woman, and this is, I'll tell you the connection, I would often watch the trailer for Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children, because it walks this line between nightmare and dream and the subconscious. And so much of her world has been this unbelievably surprising, horrific nightmare that's surreal. And with that, you've just earned a chocolate bar. Thank you. Now, and when we do T-shirts, we've got the T-shirt cannon, and we throw them. We can't really do that here. So, Susie, this is for you, and I'm about to explain what this bar is.
Thank you.
This chocolate bar was designed by Lake Champlain Chocolates in Vermont. It is 70% dark chocolate, and it was designed by Kate Brown, a chef, to reflect the novel. So it is 70% dark chocolate cocoa from Uganda. It is Burberry spices from Ethiopia. It is candied coconut, and $2 from every bar that they sell goes to Fair Trade USA to support female farmers in East Africa. We're going to be giving away some more. And you've got a question.
I do. So, can you hear me okay? A little bit close to the wall here. So, when traveling in Africa, which I've also done, and also I went on safaris and mountain hikes, what I found very interesting was always the conversations with the guides, right? They're the ones who keep you safe, who know the country, and who are also a little bit that window into the culture and how the country works. In your opinion, what do you think is the main thing, and how did that life change from a ranger in the 60s or a guide in the 60s to now, which you've experienced?
How has the life of a guide changed? Okay, first of all, and this is a term that was actually used, and it's used in the book. It is one of the most offensive terms in the colonial world of safaris. The Great White Hunter. It's literally a job description. Great White Hunter. And in my magazine, my safari magazines, and I've got a bunch of them from the 1960s, they're literally ads for great white hunters. So, in 1964, it was a far more colonial experience with a white or white leaders and black rangers, black guides black cooks, black chefs who are wholly subservient to the great white hunter who is running the show. Now it's very different. For example, our two guides were entrepreneurs, one of whom has got a massive farm of his own. And when he's not bringing Westerners into the Serengeti, he's running his farm. He's bringing his grandchildren, during the slow season, on the plane, to literally enjoy the Serengeti and be their guide. So that's one of the big differences. The other thing that I think is very different from the 1960s is the expectations of those of us who go there. I mean, I was joking about, you've got to have the perfect gin and tonic. We understand now. We are in the Serengeti. We are there because we love animals. And the reason why the Serengeti is because the first post-colonial government in Tanzania understood that this is the last best place on earth. John Evans wrote a beautiful book about that title, that in the 1960s, the first post-colonial government understood at all costs the Serengeti must be preserved. And so that's one of the other sort of wonderful legacies from the 1960s, is that it exists today because of those government officials from 60 years ago now. Thank you.
Hi.
Hello.
How are you?
Good.
You mentioned you are okay with killing off major characters. You killed off a child in one book a long time ago that I still have not gotten over at like the very end, and it has troubled me for a long time. So I'm just wondering, how do you decide who you're gonna kill? Is it like, what are my readers gonna be the most in despair about, or like I'm wondering just what the process is.
Hey, what's your name?
Emily.
Hello, Emily. I love the name Emily.
Oh, thank you.
I love books and movies that break my heart. That's one of the reasons why I love Dolen's work, because Dolen isn't afraid to break your heart and leaven it with hope sometimes too, which is really, really an important yin and yang. I like to kill characters that destroy me emotionally. When I kill a character, it's because it's just going to crush me. When I kill a character, in those books that I mentioned, it's because it was going to leave me devastated. Now, the Lioness is marginally different. Not a spoiler, not everyone on the safari gets out alive. Some of the characters who die, it made me sad. Some of the characters, it felt like justice.
Super. I can't wait.
Thanks.
Thank you.
You bet. And I've got to give a candy bar right now to my moral compass and godfather, Dr. Hachig Maradian from the Library of Congress. I have known Hachig, Hachig and I first connected in 2007 when he arrived here to edit the Armenian Weekly from Beirut, and he saw that there was this new book out called The Double Bind, and it was written by an Armenian, so he reached out to me, and he was the first person to bring me to the Armenian community in Lebanon, the first person to bring me to Armenia, the first person to bring me to historic Armenia or Eastern Turkey. And here's the thing about Hachig. In Eastern Turkey, even as an Armenian, even in a world where Turkish gendarmes are likely to search you for no other reason than the fact you are Armenian, he always had his chocolate, no matter how dangerous or dire the predicament. Even when Turkish gendarmes have machine guns pointed at you, as at one point they did at the Armenian ruins of a monastery in southeastern Turkey, he had his chocolate.
What do you mean? He had it in his pocket, right?
Yeah, it's like 90 degrees, and there's a guy with a machine gun on you, and it's melting, and he's got his chocolate.
To eat. And
To
it's
eat.
ready to...
Yeah,
Yum.
I mean, and you would not know this for a scholar, who also works at the Library of Congress, but I have seen him scale the exterior wall of a monastery from the 12th century.
That's very cool.
Is there one or two more? Oh, this is okay.
Hi.
Hi there.
I just wanted to ask about the Flight Attendant series. Like, how did that come about, and how much creative control did you have over the series?
Okay. What's your name?
Mindy.
Mindy, thank you. Have a thank you. But and I didn't give you a chocolate bar. I'm sorry, I just off my. How did the Flight Attendant start? In August of 2017, months before the book came out, Kaley Cuoco read it and said, "I want this to be my next act after The Big Bang Theory." And so Kaley Cuoco optioned it, brought it to Warner's. Warner brought it to HBO Max, and the rest is history. I had virtually no involvement in season one. I had a couple conversations with the showrunner about if we wanted a season two, how would the book be different. But season one's brilliance all belongs on one side of the camera to Steve Yockey, the showrunner and developer, to Kaley Cuoco, whose performance is just brilliant. I think she's so fantastic. Season two, again, it's season one is the book. Season two is a story based on characters from the book. So again, all props to Kaley, all props to Steve Yockey. I will say one thing. There's a character, my favorite character other than Cassie Bowden, and I don't know how many of you, this is not a spoiler, is her friend in the CIA whose cover is a flight attendant. He's an actor named Griffin Matthews. He plays Shane. I want Shane to have a spin-off. If there's no season 3 of The Flight Attendant, because we've done it, I want Shane to have a series, because every word out of Griffin Matthews' mouth is gold. I want to thank you, Dolen, and more thanks to come, but you are so gracious. Dolen has been on tour forever with Take My Hand, and she still came out tonight to help me with my voice and, to just be the world's best, in-person moderator. Thank you for being, Terry Gross tonight. You're just wonderful. We're a small crowd tonight, and I see you're all masked up. So what the hell? Let's do a signing line. We'll mask up and do a signing line.
Great.
No, but I am going to tell you this. I'm not going to talk to you in the signing line, okay? Because that is where the little voice that I have goes to die. So I'm just going to wave.
Great. Well, thank you so much. That was amazing. I'm going to go home and watch season 2. And everybody, we have books behind the register, and we'll form a line right down this aisle. Thank you.